Welcome everyone to this full council of 4th of December 2024. We start with welcome and apologies. I understand that we have apologies from Bailey, Councillor Anderson and Councillor Freshwater, is that correct? And I think we'll just take a roll call of those joining online.
Thanks, Provost. Good morning, everyone. I understand in terms of those members that are online, if they can just confirm when I call out their name, Councillor Cuthbert.
Yep, I'm here.
And Bailey Brock.
I'm here.
Councillor James.
Good morning, Scott.
Bailey Williamson.
Yeah, present, Scott.
Not aware of any other members, but if I've missed anyone, if they can shout. Sorry, and Councillor Kilgallie.
Thank you very much. I'd also like to welcome Serge Maroon to his new role as Strategic Lead for Economy Development and Planning. Congratulations, Serge. And also welcome Bernadette Martin-Scott as the Interim Strategic Lead for Education and Learning. So congratulations, Bernadette. We will have a lunch break at 1 p.m. Approximately if required, and we will have comfort breaks as required throughout the day. We shall move on to item 2, which is declarations of interest. Are there any declarations of interest in respect of items on today's agenda? If there are no declarations of interest, moving to item 3, the minute of the previous meeting. Are members happy to approve the minute of the meeting of the 30th of October 2024? Thank you. Members, item 4.1 is major electricity development applications and community engagement motion, and I'd invite Councillor Keith Allen to speak to his motion.
Thank you, Provost. Due to conversation and intervention by Chief Executive this morning, I've decided to defer this motion and discussion until a future date to be agreed. I'd like to thank all of the positive comments and the fulsome support from all officers and fellow councillors who have been in touch over the last few days. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Smith, are you content with that as well?
Yes, I am.
Thank you. Can we agree to defer the item? Thank you. Item 5 is the outstanding business statement. Are there any questions on the
Sorry, Provost, when are we deferring it to?
It would normally be deferred to the next meeting, although in this case to a time agreed with officers if appropriate. Item 5 is the outstanding business statement. Are there any questions on the outstanding business statement? Councillor Cuthbert.
Thank you. I was just wondering if we could have an update on when we're going to see the car parking survey.
Mr. Littlejohn, in your last day in post, would you like to come and speak to this item?
The survey work's underway. I can't give you an exact date, but it's going to be pretty soon. I think that's pretty imminent.
Thank you.
And Deputy Chief Executive wants to add to that.
Apologies about that. Councillor Cuthbert, yeah, just to add to that, the surveys are, as David Littlejohn has said, underway, and the team are actually looking into installing simple counters within the car parks so that we've got sort of comprehensive ongoing data. And as David said, we hope to have the kind of first lot of information, I think February of next year, but we'll get the team to confirm.
Thank you. Can I confirm that Geo is included in the car parking count?
Yeah, that is my understanding. It is.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you. If there are no other questions in the outstanding business statement, are we happy to agree the outstanding business statement and remove completed actions? Agreed. Thank you. Members, item 6 is the annual Climate Change Report and Action Plan update. I'm delighted that we're able to welcome pupils from Blairgowrie High School and Breadalbin Academy this morning who are going to update members in relation to the actions in the report, and I'd like to invite them and Davindy Grant, the team leader for climate change and sustainability, to come up and speak and present this now.
Okay. Hi everyone, I'm Chloe.
I'm Scarlett.
And I'm Ellen. And we're from Blairgowrie High School, and we just wanted to share with you all some things that we've been up to and some things that we want to do and see in the future. So earlier in the year, we had a guest speaker, which was Less Waste Laura, and she came to our school to speak to S1 to S3 pupils about the impacts of disposable vapes. She spoke to us about the many environmental and health impacts of these single-use vapes, as they create a lot of waste and litter, can cause popped tyres, and are extremely bad for your health.
So last year, our eco group Ocean Pollution class and staff went to Broadferry Beach in Dundee for a litter pick. We collected around 685 pieces of litter and logged all our findings into Kids Against Plastic website. This created awareness about how polluted our local beaches are.
We've been raising awareness of litter and sustainability by completing lots of activities. We've done things such as school ground litter picks for pupils and staff. We've done sustainability focused personal support lessons. We've done presentations during Freshers Week on eco-friendly practices with things like sustainability bingo and a recycling quiz during registration time. We've increased understanding of sustainable actions among students through fun and interactive activities.
So there's also a couple of things that we plan to do in the future. So we've successfully secured funds from our parent council to create an anti-littering mural in one of the hotspots affected by litter in our school. We are also planning to get the whole school involved with a One Planet picnic, and we will continue to work closely with our community by visiting Blairgowrie Climate Cafe and inviting them to our school.
Why do we care about climate change? So climate change could mean hotter summers, which can mean water shortages and heat waves. It can mean extreme weather like flooding and can damage homes and roads. It means threats to local wildlife and the beautiful landscapes we enjoy. Acting now can ensure that we have clean air, safe water, and a healthy environment for us and future generations.
So what we hope to see in the future. So we would like to invest in reusable water bottles and add more recycling bins, because as you can see here, all of our litter gets put together, and this is a change we would like to see. And by making this change, our school will increase in sustainability. And we would like to improve public transport and cycling paths to school, because the cycling paths we currently have aren't long enough and they're not connected and they're not very effective. And by doing this, we could cut down on car use. And by planting more trees, we would prevent flooding in the area and improve biodiversity. And by making our schools more energy efficient, we would limit our energy usage. We would like everyone to support the Council's Climate Action Plan to reduce emissions and build a more resilient future for Perth Kinross. Thank you for listening.
Hello, we're from Breadalbin Academy. I'm Sarah, this is Sophia, and that's Riri. We're doing a presentation on what our school has done for climate action.
So we have promoted a number of events in our school and community to improve awareness on climate change, including our water bottle project and our fast fashion morning.
Through our Community Council and SSC, we were granted £500 to buy reusable water bottles to reduce single-use plastic and raise awareness of the issue of plastic. The local Aberfeldy workshop implemented the design onto our water bottles.
We also had a meeting with Tayside Contracts, and we talked to them about key issues. So all our like muffins and like biscuits and all of the food at like food to go was like all wrapped in plastic, and it was kind of unnecessary. So we got rid of that, which has reduced our waste, which is pretty good.
During our fast fashion morning, we discussed what fast fashion was. So essentially, fast fashion is the mass production of all clothing. People are wasting resources and energy in cheap and bad quality clothes.
Clothes can cause pollution in developing countries where items can't be resold and they just end up in dumps, the EU has said. Europe produces 5.2 million tonnes of clothing and footwear waste every year, according to the European Commission.
So to help tackle this, we had a climate cafe, like climate morning in March, and we had some of our students, they had a play which they performed called Threads Success. It kind of brought together the community of Aberfeldian students, and at this morning we had like clothes swaps, like speakers, and our water bottles that we had like made, we kind of handed out to people who wanted them, and that was just good in reducing plastic. And the Grantley primary kids, they had like a mini fashion show where they had like made outfits of like recycled material, and that was pretty good.
The Fast Fashion Action Morning was a well-attended and successful event. We hope to collaborate more with our community on promoting awareness on climate change in the future.
Some of the key things we've learned about fast fashion is like ways we can reduce our own impact is like mending our own clothes, using charity shops more instead of just following trends, and like washing clothes less as well because that damages it. So just trying to like preserve clothes as well.
So over the summer, I did a summer school called Place for Hope with kids from all over the world. So there were kids in my group from Nigeria, Syria. There was a girl from Gaza that was living in a refugee camp in Egypt. And there were some people in Greece. So like I was on these Zoom calls with people in Athens while the wildfires were burning. And we basically met up every day for a few days to discuss water and like climate change. We got some professionals in to talk to us about climate change. And like we just like we made some puppets out of recycled materials like that would have normally just gone in the bin, and we made an original song called Life, Hope, Water with a music video, along with the help of composers Marwan Nekla and Asha Parkinson. So we just shared our stories from all over the world. So like my friends in Syria, one of the rivers that like they've known their whole lives has dried up now because of climate change. And my friend Noor from Gaza has no water. Like she's our age and she's got nothing to drink.
And so our school, we also want to do more for climate change. So we want to reduce like the electricity we use at our school. So like maybe raising awareness, like turning off laptops, turning off lights. So like that has less of an impact.
We also want to encourage more public transport usage and kids to walk or cycle to school instead of taking the car.
And also there's quite a lot of food waste at our school, like just the bins are just full, and like we don't really do, our bins are also like in Blair Gallery, like we don't really have a very good recycling system, so we want to maybe like improve that as well.
We also want to organise workshops and events to educate on climate action as well.
So obviously we've seen like the impacts that climate change is having on other countries at the moment, but like we're beginning to see those impacts here as well. For example, the 2 recent snowstorms we've had, which we probably wouldn't have had this time of year normally. So globally, 20.3 million people were displaced by extreme weather in 2023. This is really scary, and the world could see up to 1 billion climate migrants, according to the Lancet Countdown Report 2018. In 2023, 97,000 hectares were burned in Italy from the wildfires. This is only the second highest in Europe. The largest area burned was in Greece, which was 175,000 hectares. We're putting 162 million tonnes of man-made global warming pollution into the thin shell of our atmosphere every 24 hours. Yeah, and like our planet just can't deal with that, so we just need to make a change.
Thank you for listening.
Thank you.
Thank you to both groups of pupils there from Blairgowrie and from Breadalbane. It is not an easy thing for adults to come and speak in front of the full council, and you did it much better than many of us who've been in the chamber for a very long time. So thank you very much for coming along. It's really inspiring to see the level of not just interest, but knowledge and detail that you have of those issues. And perhaps the scary thing for you, but the reassuring thing for, from my point of view, is that I was on Eco Schools Committee 20 years ago, so this is probably where you're headed to make the decisions in the future, and that should perhaps reassure or scare many of the people who you might take their seats off sitting in the chamber. But thank you very much for coming along. It's really inspiring to hear from you this morning on all the work you're doing, and I think Leader of the Council also wants to add his, so thanks.
Yeah, thanks, Provost. It just shows how thoughtful and rounded young people we have in Perth and Kinross. It speaks a lot for not just our education system and how we bring on young people through our educational system, but to see such rounded individuals coming forward, having the bravery and willingness to share their passion with us, was truly inspiring. I thought that they said as much in that presentation as some of us would say in a 2-hour conversation or debate. So I'd like to thank them very much for coming along, and I think everyone across this chamber, whatever political party, can see the message, see the passion, and see also the hopefully join together with all the other climate cafes and other like-minded young people across the world, we can make a change and save humanity from itself. Thank you.
Thank you, and I think the convener of Learning and Families also wants to come on.
Yeah, thanks very much, Provost. As you say, I just want to comment as convener of Learning and Families, which is education in this context, I guess. And I just want to echo what the leader said, that the presentation is really impressive. I don't know if any of you were nervous, but it certainly didn't come across that way at all. It's a common theme, actually, as I'm in schools all the time, as other colleagues are. I'm always amazed at the confidence and the eloquence in which our kids speak. It is really impressive, and it was really impressive today as well. Actually, of course, the content of the presentation is more important than the presentation itself, but that was equally impressive. It's quite clear that you guys are doing your bit, and it makes it even more incumbent upon us to do our bit where we can. We made a good start, actually, in terms of the passive house schools of Perth High School and Riverside Primary, but that's only the start, and we must realise that that's only the start. There's still 6 to 8 other schools that we need to consider in terms of our carbon emissions. So, but thank you. I really enjoyed that. So you should be all proud of yourselves. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, folks. I'd now like to invite Davindy Grant, who's going to speak to the officer report.
Thank you, Provost, and thank you again to the students for Breadalbane and Blairgowrie. That was fantastic. So this report is the 3rd annual Climate Change Action Report. It provides the Council with an update on our progress on our climate action strategy and action plan, and the accompanying Appendix A provides an expanded summary of highlights, performances, challenges, and a look ahead. The report reviews overall performance and progress and positively shows all 7 of our overarching KPIs had year-on-year improvement. The most significant improvements are 31% reduction in PKC's own operational emissions and a 185% increase in grant funding attracted. Appendix C provides full information on KPI performance. The annual plan updates in Appendix B explore the progress of individual actions across each of the 8 themes identified in the plan. There has been year-on-year improvement in delivery. It identifies the proposed top 25 actions for year 4, and proposes additional actions. While we have had significant delivery and widespread positive improvement, the report highlights that to meet our objectives, we still need to accelerate progress in the coming few years. The report has 5 recommendations for members. For members to approve the climate change annual report and the associated action plan for year 4, including the recommended top 25 priority projects. To note that the resources required to take forward the priority projects will be included for consideration as part of the revenue and capital budget setting process. To approve the changes to the key performance indicators. To request members and officers to continue to raise resource and delivery challenges with COSLA, the UK and Scottish governments, and other relevant bodies whenever appropriate. And finally, to request all members, the strategic leadership team, and senior managers to complete carbon literacy training by September 2025. Thank you.
Thank you, Davindi. Are there any questions for Davindi on the report? Councillor Waters.
Thank you, Provost. Just a question on page 35 of our agenda pack and the KPI data. Number 7 is the climate change grant funding secured, which is just a few £1,000s secured. What's the scope of that KPI? Because we get money for active travel stuff, we get money for, upgrade decarbonisation, housing and stuff like that. It says flooding's missed out, but it doesn't say anything else missed out. So just trying to understand the full scope of that KPI.
So that KPI is showing that last year we received 3.2 million because it's in thousands of pounds. And so does that better?
Apologies for that, but I assume it does cover the full scope of anything that's coming in that sits within our action plan, climate action plan.
Yes, it includes the full scope with it excluding the money we receive from flooding and from the Scottish Futures Trust for the major property upgrades.
Thank you. Councillor James, please.
Thanks very much, Provost, and thanks for the report, Davindi. I have a few questions. I'll try and keep it brief and try and put it into one, but mine is mainly around the money. It seems ironic we've come full circle from where I was a kid and we had milk delivered on an electric vehicle, recycled bottles, we had a Keep Britain Tidy campaign, and that was obviously right because we're doing it again now. However, what we have in front of us now, I'm looking at some of the figures throughout the report. I'm just looking particularly around about page 80, 88, 89 and around there, but there's some eye-watering figures in millions. Now, if this is as important as we're claiming, shouldn't this not just be embedded within the council sections rather than having, a dedicated officer at a cost, a dedicated committee at another cost? Are we justified in spending this sort of money when later on in our papers today we're looking at a 10% possible increase every year for council tax? Thank you.
No. They're having a debate as to who's answering this. Fraser, you're the senior person here, you can answer it.
I'll start. So clearly a number of large scale issues for us to consider as an authority over the years. we've made good progress, I think, with the money that we do have. We continue to explore the opportunities more widely through external funding sources. But I think this has to be seen as a medium to long term game. Yeah, so we need to be making sure that we take those opportunities as best we can with the funding that is available. It makes reference in the report to consideration as part of the revenue and capital budget. I would like to see us bring forward some of those items that are sitting within the action plan for consideration by members as part of that. And ultimately that's a choice, isn't it, with all of this, and that has to sit also in the context of the medium-term financial plan and against all of the other council objectives that we have. So it's nothing specific there, but for me it is about trying to make best use of the resources we have, securing the external funding that is available, marrying those two together, and pretty much getting the best bang for bucks we can.
Great, thank you. Councillor Braun next, please.
Thanks, convener. Could I just also add my thanks to our visitors for their comments this morning? And you're quite right, they do speak a lot better than some of us, and as you're about to find out. And could I also add a quick comment, if I may, and to say to them that recycling isn't something new. As one of the oldest members in this chamber, grew up in the 60s, our milk was delivered in glass bottles, which were washed out when we finished with the milk, put back on the step, the milkman took them away, and they were used again. The little foil tops that used to be on those milk bottles were collected and sent to Blue Peter, which was used then to get guide dogs for the blind. So this whole thing was recycled, and to add to that, the floats were electric milk floats. So this is nothing really new. So we were doing this a long time ago. But my question really comes down to this, and it's down to vehicles. We're obviously pushing to get more and more electric charging points in place for vehicles. But I'm wondering, have we actually looked at the future of hydrogen? Because are we going to find ourselves in a situation where we have all these electric charging points across Perth and Kinross, just as everybody's switching to hydrogen cars? Have we looked into how quickly hydrogen will become available to us? Green hydrogen, I believe. And I read somewhere last year that when it reaches production levels at $2 a kilo, it then becomes economical to produce it in bulk. Is that something we're looking at? Because hydrogen seems to be plentiful, it burns in a combustion engine, and of course hydrogen fusion is way ahead. So should we really be putting our money into that rather than electric vehicle charging points?
So the council has been looking at electric vehicles, and Serge Marone's team has been investigating potential sort of hydrogen fueling stations and alternatives. In terms of the strategy for Perth and Kinross, when you look at the Scottish Government's energy strategy, they have for hydrogen, they have an energy hierarchy. And in terms of the energy hierarchy for hydrogen, personal vehicles currently are the lowest use or the final use for hydrogen vehicles. Just in terms of when you're looking at all of the full system and what needs to be replaced, there's industrial uses that it's very hard to decarbonize with any other mechanisms besides industrial, even sort of some district heating systems where hydrogen or potentially putting hydrogen to the gas network will be sort of required or necessary. And then also when we look at our own fleet decarbonization for the heavy fleet, those are the hardest to decarbonize and will likely be the sort of priorities for hydrogen. For sort of passenger vehicles, right now, there's not currently the sort of promotion within the auto industry or within the Scottish Government's strategy. So right now we're sort of following the government strategy towards electric vehicles.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Welch.
Thank you, Provost. It's the section KPIs, Appendix 3. I think it's page 4 of 12. It talks about renewable energy generated across the PKC estate, including from low carbon heat sources. That seems to be in decline. Is there any reason for that? And are there any actions been taken to look to reverse that trend? Thank you.
So one of the reasons that the energy generated across the council's estate fluctuates quite significantly year to year is the energy generated from our biomass boilers is included in that figure. And I believe last year, 1 or 2 of the biomass boilers were down, which had a impact on that figure. And my understanding is that this year they're up and running. So that should go the other direction again.
Okay, thank you, and thank you for the clarity around hydrogen. You know, it's very much promoted by the oil and gas industry. It is a solution in some instances, but not a panacea. So
Sorry, is that a supplementary or a comment? Councillor Harvey, please.
Yeah, thank you, Provost. The questions I have relate to the first set of KPIs relating to energy and buildings, and I can commend you on the reduction in the total area-wide carbon dioxide emissions, but I note in scope 1 and 2 emissions from non-domestic council estate has kind of crept back up in the last couple of years, and the target is still the same, 4,396 by 2030. Do you reckon, is there any particular area where you're concerned about in reducing the kind of carbon emissions, carbon dioxide emissions in those type of estates?
Just to clarify, are you meaning any areas that are particular problems or areas of focus?
I would say more the area, if any areas you're particularly focusing on within those numbers that are particularly maybe stubborn to get to reduce.
In terms of those, the work is being led by my energy colleagues, and they've recently just had a significant piece of work completed, which is an estate decarbonisation plan, which has sort of developed a detailed and costed pathway for how to deliver this. And so that has highlighted the key things. One of the areas that they are focused on, though, and is what, if you'll notice in the budget pressure, when the financial section, it talks about that there's a £6 million need over the next 3 years, and that is for the target to remove the oil-fired boilers from our schools. And that is challenging for some of our rural schools, especially because of the need to get up the energy efficiency to a high enough standard for them to be sort of heat pump ready.
Okay, thank you very much.
Councillor Duff.
Thanks, Provost. If I read the report correctly, Perth Kinross Council themselves are responsible for about 1% of the emissions within Perth Kinross, and we're making great strides towards reducing that. However, by reflection, obviously 99% of the carbon emissions occur elsewhere in Perth and Kinross. Given that we've got limited resources, I wonder if it would make a bigger impact on reducing carbon emissions if we were to focus more on reducing the 99%. If we can get PKC from 1 down to 0, that's great. But I think, could we not get a bigger bang for our buck in tackling the 99%? If we could get it down to 95 or whatever, that would potentially have a greater effect. So I wonder, how are we doing in relation to reducing emissions elsewhere? Who's monitoring and who's monitoring that? Thank you.
So in terms of getting bang for our buck, in terms of if our objective is purely to reduce area-wide or overall carbon emissions, then I agree with you. And it would be, we'd have a greater focus on addressing the area-wide emissions than PKC's own operations. However, we have a range of targets and legislative requirements from the Scottish Government around our social housing, getting the energy improvement up to those, and there's targets around our buildings as well. So we have the need to be addressing those at the same time.
If I could just, sorry, David, do you want to come in?
Good morning, members. I'm Pete Leonard. I'm the Climate Change and Zero Waste Manager, so it's nice to introduce myself to you today. Just to add further to what Devindy was saying there, that whilst a lot of the legislation at national, well, international and national level is in place, and people can quite often feel that, well, you know, that's not a council's responsibility necessarily, or it's beyond us, if you like. Over 70% of all of the actions that are set out in legislation are under an element of control or an element of strategic direction can be given influence, if you like, by local authorities. So it is really important that clearly we've got to meet with our statutory responsibilities, which are aimed at producing strategies and actions and in some cases enforcement to ensure that others are on this journey with us. But it's also equally important that we demonstrate leadership, place leadership by getting our own house in order. Thank you.
You wanted to follow up, Councillor?
Yeah, I just wondered, are there any indications of where other organisations or other industries or whatever are reducing their climate emissions, and do we kind of monitor where that 99% is going? Thank you.
So in terms of monitoring, we get data annually from the Department of Energy Security and Net Zero that produces an overall figure for Perth and Kinross, which gives us the 99%, and which is what KPIs 1, 2, and 3 are related to. And then as well, funded by COSLA, there's a new Scottish Climate Information Service, which is focused at providing more detailed information on that type of information directly to local authorities. And then in addition to that, colleagues are working with local businesses and the major businesses to find their climate reduction plans and what actions and progress they have made.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Allen, you have 2 questions.
Thank you, Provost. First of all, I'd like to thank and congratulate the kids who spoke earlier on. It's great to see that our younger community are alive and kicking. And following on from that, I'd just like to ask a question about, it's figure 4 on page 51, but it's explained in page 50 that since 2005, per capita greenhouse gas emissions in Perth and Kinross have been steadily reducing. That's great. It follows a trend for Scotland, but we have continued and consistently been higher in our emissions than the Scottish average. And it goes on to suggest that that would be expected for a local authority with a more rural population. Given what I've heard from the kids this morning and what they're doing in the rural part, what can we do as a council to get us below that Scottish average? And how long do you think it's going to take us to do that? Thank you.
I think to get us below the average, we need to be delivering all of the actions and the action plan at a sort of on target or an accelerated pace. Colleagues are doing great work to try and get us below that average. So one of the key reasons that rural local authorities are higher is the transport element. And our public transport team, when working with the new Glenfarg public transport bus, and then similarly all of the community transport schemes that will be coming out over the next year, those will hopefully help to reduce our rural transport footprint.
Thank you. Well, that follows nicely into my second question, really. It's on page 90 and it's in the transport section, talking about working with taxi operators to accelerate the transition to electric vehicles. Taxi drivers and fleet managers don't want to transition to electric vehicles. How are we going to cope with that and how are we going to achieve it? Thank you.
For this question, it's less my area of expertise, and I will Oh, is Neil on the call?
Is Neil Moran on the call?
Yes, I am. Yep. Sorry, just trying to work my camera. Yeah, yeah. Just adding to what Davinder was saying, the taxi sector is a challenge, but I think we can look at what has been achieved in other areas in pushing the electrification of the taxi fleet. You know, specifically Dundee have got quite a significant proportion of their taxi and private hire cars now fully electric. Obviously, we've got maybe more of a challenge in terms of the mileage that's done covering the rural area, but as vehicle technology increases in terms of range and things like that, the barriers to adoption will come down, and that in hand with the increase in the infrastructure for charging that the taxi operators can utilise will again reduce those barriers to adoption. So it's a case of just continuing to make the case and pushing the taxi trade as much as we can.
Thank you. And thank you to Councillor Allen for a flashback to my youth. Live and Kicking was a TV programme in the 90s when I was a child, and Councillor Braun's already taken us down memory lane with the milk bottles, which also existed when I was a child. So we didn't collect iron brew bottles like Councillor Stewart, but if I can invite Councillor Peter Barrett to ask the next question, please.
Thanks, Provost. I'll not remind people that televisions were once in black and white, but anyway. Firstly, I'd really like to applaud and commend the young women that have spoken to us this morning. I found their presentations inspiring, and I think that they're doing great work to raise the impacts and awareness of the impacts of the climate and emergency, combined with taking practical steps to do something about it at a community level. So very well done for that. My question is with regard to page 66 of the report and the HEAPS ABS Home Energy Efficiency Programme area-based schemes funding that the council has awarded of almost £2 million in September of this year. With, as I understand it, the tenders for the works to be carried out with that funding to be received by the end of October. We have unfortunately had a fairly checkered past about actually spending that money and delivering those improvements with, I think, something like £5 million worth of funding between 2020 and 2023 and only £200,000 spent. So you may not be able to answer this at this minute, but I'd be very keen to know, have we received £2 million worth of tenders? Are we going to deliver £2 million worth of work by June next year? And if we are, can we get a breakdown of how that's going to be spent across the 5 priorities? Thank you.
I think Nicola Linen's on the call to answer this question. Grant, is this a question that you could answer in Nicola's absence?
I don't mean, no, that's on the domestic side. It's not someone I'm familiar with the HEAPS ABS.
In that case, we'll get the information to you as soon as we can.
Okay, thank you. I've got a further question from Councillor Harvey.
Okay, thank you, Provost. It's a kind of minor question compared to the other ones, and something that definitely didn't exist when I was a youth as well. At the end of the KPIs, there's issues to be views on climate change in various different areas, website, Facebook, Twitter, and I noticed the numbers have gone down substantially, particularly Twitter. Do you still think there's utility in keeping these kind of pages going, considering the numbers are going down and the state of some of these things, or is that something you're going to look at going forward?
So in terms of why the numbers were down, part of that was due to the officer who was in charge of the social media being on sick leave for a significant portion of the year. So we did a lighter touch engagement last year. Now this year, the numbers are already sort of up again and followers are growing. In terms of which platforms we're using, that is something we will do a review of.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Smith.
Thank you very much, Provost. A couple of things I'd like to say to the youngsters first. I'm very much a person that picks up rubbish on the street. I'm well in the hundreds of bags now, okay? So I really enjoy it. I'm really disappointed that I have to keep on doing it, and I'll need to do it again next week. I've seen the damage to animals because I come from the seaside, and I have seen damage to seals. So well done, and it's good to see the young ones. Except have a word with your pals back at McDonald's, make sure they put the rubbish in the bin, please, would you? Thank you. Anyway, my question would be regarding recyclable materials. I would like to know why, and this is probably, you'll answer it by saying this is done in the past, why are our recyclable materials going to a place in Fife when in Perth here we have a perfectly good recyclable company? And I just don't understand, they're bringing in stuff from Aberdeenshire, they're bringing in stuff from Murray. So why are we sending it away? And will this help your targets if we stopped it and did it in our own backyard, in other words? Thank you.
So all of our various waste streams are done under a range of contracts. Those contracts have to be procured in line with procurement legislation, which is an open market tender. As part of the specification of those contracts is an element around quality, but also things like carbon efficiency, so distance travelled and things. So all of those things are taken into account, as well as price and value. And so that's how the contracts have been determined, and that's the way that we stick there. I know 5 might seem like a long way away, but actually in terms of the industry, it is deemed as being relatively close compared to other examples where stuff's going away to England or across even to other parts of the world. So that's the position where we are arrived at. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Allen.
Thank you, Provost. On page 45, there's a chart there and it talks about delivering fair transition and green recovery. And one of the sections there, it says we're working with businesses to identify and address skills shortages to support the green economy. Can you explain a wee bit about that? Because that's going to be an important part. I mean, individuals can't make much of an impact on climate change, but businesses can. Can you just maybe elaborate a wee bit on that for me, please?
So that chart is just search. Someone online wants to answer the question. Sorry, I thought they said someone else wanted to answer the question. In terms of that chart is what the council's commitments and objectives are. So sort of working with businesses to develop the skills is one of our sort of 27 strategic objectives. And it is something that we have been doing over the past 3 years. One example of this is this year we've received funding from Innovate UK to explore how we can accelerate decarbonising people's homes. And with that, earlier this year, we've held 2 business and industry roundtables, understanding where different suppliers are in terms of the services they can provide, where they would like to go, and other opportunities that they potentially would like to get into, what training, etc. So we can help match them up, identify, and provide sort of skills and training to them. More widely, green skills is something that the Scottish government have identified there's potential growth in jobs. Somewhere of the range of sort of 10 to 100,000 jobs could potentially come under green jobs. And if you think about as part of this transition, as people have talked about, there will be significant resources required. And it's about how we can make sure that Perth and Kinross companies are in the best place to be hiring employees and be keeping that wealth in the local area.
Thank you. Yes, a short supplementary.
Yeah, on the following page, it suggests that green business grants, 22 businesses have been paid a total of 380,000 from the Capital Green Recovery Grant Scheme. How do we actually audit that?
I will need to come back to you with details of this scheme. Is Serger Graham Penfield on the call? Either of them are. If not, I'll need to.
I don't think they've joined the call.
I'll have to provide the details afterwards. I don't know the details of the audits on
We
it.
will get a written answer. Okay, thank you. I've got Councillor Forbes, followed by Councillor Duff, and then Councillor Braun with the last question.
Thanks, Provost. See that we're referencing the Comrie Flood Prevention Scheme now. I know when we build these, there's a very specific financial calculation about whether it's good value for money or not. But I wonder if we analyse that from an environmental point of view. In other words, do we trade or do we look at the environmental impact caused by building such a scheme against the potential long-term benefits of it in the way that we do from the financial aspect of these schemes?
I know as part of these flood schemes, we have to undertake strategic environmental assessments, which do look at the full environmental impacts. I don't know if my colleagues from the flood team want to add anything else.
So the question, do you wish to repeat the question, Councillor Forbes?
There we go. It was regarding the Comrie Flood Prevention Scheme, or I guess these schemes in general. So I know that we look very carefully at the financial benefit, and I know the government have an analysis we need to follow regarding the cost of it. I'm wondering if we also look at the environmental impact, because presumably building something like that will have a detrimental environmental impact. So do we have to weigh those one against the other and make sure that the benefits of building something like a flood prevention scheme outweigh the detriment that building such a scheme will do to the environment?
Yeah, so as part of the flood scheme, and you'll see it South Kinross later on, that we do an environmental impact assessment and report that covers all aspects of the environmental impact of the scheme, and that's taken into account in the cost benefit ratio for the scheme. So it's not solely based on how much it costs, it also includes the benefits or disbenefits of the scheme.
Thank you. Councillor Duff next, please.
Thanks, Provost. My question is about paragraph 6.4 on page 36. It's to do with resources. It talks there about there being significant quantities of climate change related external grant funding available, but officers don't currently have the capacity to pursue this. And I just wonder whether or not we could pursue funding to get us the additional resource to allow us to apply for external grant funding, because obviously it's going to take a lot of money to do any of the climate change stuff that we're talking about. And if we're missing out on the opportunity to bring money in, it also goes on to talk about innovative partnership models to bring in private finance. So I wonder what we're doing in relation to that. Thank you.
Again, I'll start. I think in terms of the team resourcing to secure external funding, we will and are working more closely with members of David Littlejohn's team, Serge Marone's team going forward, the external funding team specifically, and I know there has been dialogue between officers in that regard. So I think we already have there are issues around capacity, but our ability perhaps internally to look at that will hopefully be strengthened going forward to try and explore those opportunities. In terms of the second part of the question, sorry. Not something I'm familiar with. I'm not sure if colleagues Davindi or Pete, sorry.
Thank you, Provost. So yes, we did meet with the funding team actually just recently to talk about this particular issue, to look at what we can do further to explore all the range of grants and funds that are out there, but also to take perhaps more of a strategic view in terms of looking at all of the key projects that we want to take forward and try and build a portfolio of funding around those. In terms of the private sector, I know that there are some of the conversations from our business and colleagues. In Serge's team, they've been looking at potential public-private partnerships around EV energy provision, for example, looking at strategic partnerships to take part in strategic energy partner. So bringing people in to help to make these big, massive place-based investments, bringing in the private sector to help that will be essential really going forward.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Braun with the final question.
Thanks, thanks, Provost. Not wishing to leave Councillor Barrett on his own with his memories. I too can remember black and white television when you switched on, the valves had to warm up. So those were the days. My question really is: are we? I suppose it's a general question. Are we trying to push climate action one way? We're trying to find a one solution fits all thing for the public. I have some of your comments on that. I mean, we talk about air source heat pumps, which will work well in probably towns, but in rural areas where we rely on overhead cable infrastructure, we can lose power and people are going to freeze. Electric cars are fine in towns and cities, but in rural areas, hybrid cars are more advantageous. I drive a hybrid car, and normally in summertime it's very efficient. But at the moment, in this weather, the battery is losing power rapidly because of the cold weather. So it's a general question, but officers might have to comment themselves. Are we trying to push a one solution fits all, one size fits all solution, rather than looking at the picture overall and saying, well, fine, electric cars are in towns, hybrid in the rural areas, air source heat pumps in towns and cities, but we might need wood burners in rural areas because people freeze. I mean, it's just a view of your view. Is that a better way of looking at it from a much wider picture than just Perth and Kinross? That is the way we should be looking at it. And would the public accept that more?
Thank you, Provost. So I think from my perspective, I've new into the council. I've been looking at all of the various activities that the theme leads are pursuing, and I've been really impressed with the range of approaches that they've been taking. They're not applying a one size fits all. They're looking at what's most appropriate and exactly the kind of things that you were setting out there. So I'm really reassured that the officers that are leading on these things are using creativity and good common sense in terms of what the right approach might be within the realms of modern technology and evolving technology. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Councillor Waters will now introduce the report. Thank you very much, Davindi and the rest of the team, and Pete for answering those questions. Councillor Waters, please.
Thank you. Thank you, Provost. Firstly, I would like to extend, my gratitude and thanks to the students who came in to present to us today. Chloe, Scarlett, and sorry I missed the last girl from Blairgowrie there, and to Sarah, Sophia, and Ruby from Bredaubin. It is really inspiring to listen to you passionately advocating for our planet's future, and what you are doing locally to make a difference. And also what your requests are from us as a council, and things that we can look at to help make a difference for you in addressing your personal, what I'll use personally and within your communities, address the climate emergency. Your dedication to understanding and address the critical issue gives me hope that we can create a sustainable Perth and Kinross for generations to come. Just remembering, one of our corporate plan priorities reads Perth and Kinross is a safe and vibrant place, mitigating the impact of climate and environmental change for this and future generations. And that's part of the reason why we have a climate change and sustainability committee. That's part of a change why we have a very broad and very comprehensive action plan and delivery plan for climate change. It's not just for us, our generation, it's for the future generations coming through. I'd like to thank you for your hard work, insightful perspectives, and for attending today to remind us that each of us can make a difference. I'd also like to thank officers with the climate change team for producing this comprehensive update, and to all the staff throughout the council for all the work that has been done in progressing our action plan and helping to address the challenges of this climate emergency. This paper presents the council's annual report on delivery of our climate action plan. It is great to see the hard work that has gone into delivering impactful action. A few highlights to mention include: we are ensuring that we have a good roadmap with publication of our key decarbonisation strategies, including our new mobility strategy and our local area energy plan. We are protecting our assets from climate change and ensuring connectivity for our residents is maintained by screening all 865 of our road bridges for scour potential. I wondered how many people knew what scouring was, but I will give a wee definition just so there is a clear understanding, because it's an important piece of work that officers are engaging in. And it's where a detailed estimate is taken of all the bridges. When fast-moving water around a bridge removes the sediment from underneath the foundation, leaving behind scour holes, these scour holes can then seriously impact the structural element of the bridges. So the amount of work that is going on behind the scenes just now with officers checking these will again leave benefits for our generation as well as the future generations. So it's an important piece of work in adapting to the impacts of climate change. We have directly improved the energy efficiency of struggling households using 3.1 million, I got that one right with the amount of zeros, Eco4 funding to install 500 individual measures helping address fuel poverty. Additionally, we funded free home energy advice to over 2,200 additional households. We are working with our communities to protect and restore nature and biodiversity throughout the council area, where 18 nature restoration funded projects were successfully delivered in year 3 by both the council and our communities. The report also identifies the top 25 actions in the plan for the upcoming year. Delivery of these actions and the wider plan has the potential to positively reshape life in Perth and Kinross, including how we get around, how we heat our homes, how we recycle and embrace the circular economy, and how we enhance our nature and biodiversity, while creating the green jobs of the future. In addition to helping climate change, these have the potential to reduce drivers of poverty, increase accessibility, and improve health and well-being for everyone. This yearly update clearly identifies that we need to increase the pace of action and commitment to meet our targets and goals. One of the recommendations of the paper is for all elected members to commit to completing carbon literacy training by September 2025 to help us plan for the future. This is an informative and useful course that will help embed climate action into all our decision making. I would like to encourage all of you to have a chat with council officers and to enrol on the course and to find a way that works within our own busy schedules. I am now happy to move this report.
Thank you, Councillor Waters. I'd like to invite Councillor Liz Barrett to second the report. As Councillor Waters gave quite a long moving speech there, normally you would get the balance of 10 minutes, which in this case is not very many minutes at this point. However, I'll give a bit of leeway because he did use some of his introductory remarks to thank the young people, so a bit more leeway than a few minutes.
Thank you, Provost. I'd like to add my thanks to the students from Blairgowrie and Breadalbane for your presentations, for your commitment, for the difference that you are making and your calls to action and support from me and my fellow councillors. I know you're an inspiration to the other students who came to the youth conference here in this chamber last month, and I thank you and them for all that you're doing. I know those of us who are concerned about the climate and biodiversity emergencies are deeply disappointed by the reining back from commitments and targets by governments across the world, including those in Westminster and Holyrood. We know the impacts of climate change are most likely to be felt by those experiencing greater risks of poverty and disadvantage. And as is confirmed by this report, we in PKC need to increase the pace and scale of our actions to meet our targets and commitments. But as the Council moves our own activities from strategy and planning to delivery, we need our national governments to provide consistency on priorities and funding sources and clarity on what they'll be required to deliver, not vague targets with no detail and no resources, delays to funding and unachievable timescales for delivery. We need clarity now on funding for our flood risk management schemes to provide more homes and businesses, to protect more homes and businesses from the misery of flooding. And I strongly endorse the request in the report that members and officers continue to raise the resource and delivery challenges with COSLA, the Scottish and UK governments and other relevant bodies. I would endorse our thanks to Davindi Grant and the climate change team and officers across the whole council who are doing their best with the resources that we do have, as recognised by our achieving the prestigious Carbon Disclosure Project A score for our approach to tackling emissions. Richard has mentioned the wider benefits provided by our climate change actions, and I'd just like to highlight as well the excellent progress being made through changes in waste management, like the embracing of the grey-loaded bins and diverting rubbish from landfill, our progress in developing a circular economy plan so we waste less of everything where we can, and increasing the plans for increasing recycling in our schools, as the students have asked for. I'd also like to thank everyone who's doing their best to reduce the landfill we produce over Christmas, shopping locally to support our great independent businesses in Perth itself and across the area. I endorse the request to all members and senior council officers who care about our planet to commit to completing carbon literacy, which is simply climate literacy, by September 2025. As Richard said, each of us can make a difference, and I welcome the progress we've made as a council on the things that are under our direct control and to help residents, communities and businesses to tackle climate change and address the many challenges that face us all. I'm pleased to second the report. Hope that wasn't too long, Provost. Thank you.
You did very well there, Councillor. It was 3 minutes, so very, very well indeed. Thank you for keeping it brief and all very relevant as well. Councillor Duff with the first comment, please.
Thank you, Provost. Can I also firstly thank the pupils from Blairgowrie and Breadalbane Carry for the presentation and for your passion and awareness of these important issues. Can I also thank Devindy Grant and Pete Leonard for the report and for the progress being made on the various parts within it. As we have heard, this is an area of our business that's going to require massive amounts of funding, hundreds of millions of pounds, I think I mentioned in the report. And we do need to do more to put pressure on COSLA, the Scottish Government and the UK Government to deliver the resources we require to deliver on our programme. But I think we also need to do more ourselves, and I think it's disappointing if we are missing out on external grant funding or private finance because of a lack of staff capacity. I'm sure that an investment in officer capacity would give us a significant return on that investment and would be a valuable spend to save initiative. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Councillor Rebeck next, please.
Thanks very much again, Provost. I'm very supportive of this plan, this paper, and the good work done by our Climate Change and Sustainability Committee, because it is impressive. But speaking more broadly, we do need to be bold. We will need to put our money where our mouths are, and that will mean challenge. I think we need to look at ourselves as well as national governments. Putting our money where our mouth is and we're away to discuss medium-term financial plan will mean sacrifices in other areas, and that's okay. We need to do that. And climate change is more actually now than reusing milk bottles, etc. And I don't mean any criticism to previous speakers, because all of these little things are really important. But for example, our Blairgowrie pupils spoke about planting trees. Deforestation is a real problem in the world, and I think we need to do our bit locally to combat that. Our Breadalbane pupils spoke about fast fashion, which is a real problem worldwide. I think I already do my bit in that regard, right enough for wearing jeans and sambas all the time, but that's more to do with laziness and lack of style than any kind of altruistic motive. But we do need to be bold. I think that's the serious point. We do need to be bold here, if not for ourselves, but for the current generation, some of whom have spoken so eloquently this morning, because it's them who will reap what we sow. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Rebeck. Leader of the Council.
Thanks, Provost. Yes, it was. I sat there listening to the questions and to the presentation, and it was amazing how the presentation was so rounded and covered a gamut of different things, where a lot of the questions were very focused and on certain aspects of tackling climate change. Inside this, if we look further through the report with biodiversity of what we're doing in Perth Kinross, it's a massive range, not one silver bullet or one thing around transport. Obviously, if we're a rural as we are, local authority, there'll be many different bits. As somebody said, there is no one size fits all, but we've got to adapt and use what we can to tackle climate change in each of the different areas of our local authority. We do have an external funding officer. This administration appointed him. If you'd gone down to meet the funder last week, there was 3 members of that team there willing to talk about how they were looking for external funding across there. So that is resourced to a certain extent. I think Devindy and some of the questions, maybe at the weekend you can become a new mode of transport manufacturer as well, and come up with a vehicle that will solve all our problems. But seriously, you and your team do a heck of a lot of work on a massive subject, and working with you not nearly as much as the convener and vice convener do, but it's fantastic to see how you have the passion, the same passion as the young people have, and that's what you need if you're working in this sector. You've got to have the same passion as that. So I'd just like to thank you all. Thank you for the report. I hope everybody, I know there'll people, I don't expect everybody to read it through and take everything in, because I certainly wouldn't claim to do that because there's so many papers here. But take this report home and have a read of it over the next weeks or when you have some time, and you'll see what the officers at Perth Kinross and what we as a local authority are doing to tackle climate change. So thank you.
Thank you very much. Councillor McKeon.
Thank you very much, Provost. I think the climate action report and the update on the action plan is one of the important papers that come to this chamber. This is one of the most important aspects of our lives as we move forward. I think that is a report that looks to the future and doesn't worry about black and white TVs, etc. of the past. I think that the master plan, it describes a lot to do with our housing sector and how we need to improve our houses. And I know that our housing team are actively participating in taking these actions forward. But as others have suggested, funding will be something that will need to be looked at for these changes to our housing sector. Also within the report, and a very important section, I think, is the stuff around engagement and education. And I think, as others have said, our presentations today from the school pupils demonstrates that our education and engagement with them is having the desired effect and enthusing them to take forward what is passionate for them. And a bit, I think, like some of my school report cards, I think the rest of us could do better and need to pay more attention. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor James.
Thanks, Provost. Sad to say, I'm not in agreement with some of the recommendations put before us. So I don't think I'd get anybody to second an amendment by me, but I really don't agree with recommendations 2.1.2 and 2.1.5. I think to commit to money that we don't know what we're going to spend at this point is a bit previous, and I don't like to be schooled on something that I've been practicing for the last 60 plus years. You know, as I intimated earlier, you know, I recycled as a kid. I grew up with electric vehicles. I worked on a farm, and as long as I can remember, our farmers looked after dikes and ditches to keep us flood free, and now Quangos are telling them they can't do it, and here we are. So I'm not supportive of those two recommendations, Provost. We have a climate emergency. It's happened on a 100,000-year cycle for the last million years, and I don't think that the 154,000 residents of Perth and Kinross will have too much of an impact on the 8.2 billion residents of this planet who are also building coal-fired generators in China. I don't think our carbon or our CO2 offset will go any way towards that. So it's easy to spend somebody else's money. I just think the current way we are here, we need to be careful with our money. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Councillor James. Councillor Waters, do you wish to sum up?
No, if there's no amendment, I'm happy just to have the report moved. Thank you.
Okay, Councillor Welch, you did sneak in there, but I'll let you have a very brief comment before we finish up.
Thank you, Provost. I think it's incredibly important also to realise in times when, obviously there's a significant impact on people's lives worldwide and in Perth and Kinross of climate change. I think you should also recognise that this is a significant economic opportunity for Scotland. Scotland is hugely well placed and the envy of most of Europe with its resources of renewable generation. Indeed, in our own area in Perth and Kinross, we have significant opportunities for renewable generation and being approached by developers to work with landowners and farmers. This element of it is incredibly important, and it's good to see the investment in time and effort and scale that this report brings forward. And again, I'd like to commend the report. Thank you.
Great, thank you. Noting that Councillor Waters doesn't wish to sum up, members, are we happy to agree the report? Thank you. Members, we're going to take a comfort break and we're going to reconvene at 12 noon. Thank you very much. Okay, good afternoon, members. And Councillor James, I note that you wish to register your dissent in terms of the recommendations of the last report, and that will be Noted in the minute. Thank you. Members, item 7 is the South Kinross Flood Protection Scheme, and Rory Stewart, the flood engineer, is going to introduce the report.
Thank you, Provost. Afternoon, everyone. So the report presented today provides an update on the progress of the South Kinross Flood Protection Scheme and proposes that the Council takes a preliminary decision under the Flood Risk Management Scotland Act 2009 to confirm the proposed scheme without modification. The report has been brought before full Council today rather than the Climate Change and Sustainability Committee due to the need to confirm the scheme in order to progress matters with minimal delay for the community of Kinross, driven by funding deadlines imposed by the Scottish Government. The Council's duties with regards to flooding are set out within the Flood Risk Management Scotland Act 2009, with Schedule 2 of the Act specifically relating to delivery of flood protection schemes. The latest, 2022 to 2028, 4th Estuary Local Flood Risk Management Plan was published in March 2023, with the provision of a flood protection scheme at South Kinross included on the national priority list and being one of the key actions within the plan. Kinross is located in the River Leven catchment with 3 watercourses in the local area, the South Quake, the Gellyburn and the Clashburn, all of which flow into Loch Leven to the east of the town. There is a history of flooding in Kinross, most recently in February and August 2020, and the preferred flood scheme approach involves the construction of flood walls and embankments along the South Quake, culvert improvements on the Clashburn, and a flood storage embankment adjacent to the M90 motorway services at Turf Hills. Properly flood resilience measures will also be adopted for a small number of properties next to Loch Leven, and a plan of the preferred flood scheme is provided in Appendix A of the report for your reference. Since our last report to the Climate Change and Sustainability Committee in November 2023, plans for the flood scheme have taken a significant step forward. The outline design of the scheme has been developed and has been subject to extensive consultation with the community and other stakeholders, with feedback being predominantly positive, with the majority of the community being supportive of the proposed scheme design. The scheme notice was formally published under the Flood Act in March 2024 and received 2 valid objections from local landowners who are required at this moment in time to remain anonymous for GDPR purposes. Council officers have held discussions with these 2 landowners, but at this time their objections have not been withdrawn, and a summary of those objections and the Council's responses to that have been set out in Appendix B of the report. The decision before Council today is essentially to maintain progress within the statutory process set out in the Flood Act and make a preliminary decision to confirm the flood scheme without modification. This will allow the flood scheme to be referred to the Scottish ministers, who will decide whether they wish to call the scheme in for a public local inquiry or to refer it back to the Council to hold a local authority hearing similar to that which took place for the Comrie Flood Protection Scheme. In either event, this will lead to the consideration and determination of the objections and will result in the Scottish ministers or the Council making a final further decision on the scheme. Subject to that final decision, the Council will then be in a position to complete the detailed design of the scheme, move into the procurement phase and to commence its construction. As the South Kinross Flood Protection Scheme has been prioritised in the published 4th Estuary Flood Risk Management Plan and the local FRM plan, the flood scheme is in receipt of Scottish Government capital grant assistance, and this will continue up to 80% of its value at tender stage. The Council is required to fund the remaining 20% of the cost of the scheme, assuming it remains economically viable, and this was approved by Council Committee on the 28th of February 2024. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Are there any questions? Councillor Robertson, please.
Thank you, Provost. I'm pleased to see this report coming to committee. Can we get some idea, given if the wind's in our back, when we will actually start to put this flood protection scheme in place, given that the issues with 2 objections being lodged? Thank you.
Hi, yes, so it depends on the process that the objections take. So we would estimate it might take up to 12 months, and then at that point we would start detailed design and some further ground investigation as well. So your detailed design would be about a year from the point that the objections process was complete, and then construction would happen after that. So you might be in 2027 or beyond.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Massey.
Thank you, Provost. My question just been asked.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Councillor Braun.
Thanks, Provost. Looking through the objectors' comments, one of the common factors is this question about valuation. And I just wonder, how's that taken out? Do we do a valuation and that's it, or do they get a chance to do their own valuation and we combine the two? I mean, or is it just everything's based on what we've done?
So are you talking in terms of the valuation of their property or the cost benefit of the scheme?
So the valuation of their property, on which we're basing the compensation on.
Yeah, so we employ, obviously our estates team do the valuation on behalf of the council, and we have invited the objectors to put forward their own evaluation, which the estates team can, review.
So to follow up quickly, have the objectors done their evaluation, or are they sort of sticking their heels in?
We provided a valuation to them, which they declined. We then offered them the opportunity to provide their own valuation, which we could then consider. They declined to do that at the moment. So no, we're at a bit of an impasse there.
Okay, thank you. Bailey Ahern.
Thank you very much, Provost. My question is based on the councillor's response to Objector 1's objection, where he believes that the council were flooding the land deliberately. In the second paragraph on the response, it says the scheme will not introduce flood risk on their land, but may temporarily increase flood depths. It then goes on to explain about compensation under the flood risk management. Why would you need compensation under the flood risk management if it will not flood their land?
That specific objection, it is a registered floodplain, their land. So we're not, their argument was that we were unlawfully flooding their land. We're not changing the flood regime or the overland flow regime. We're simply intercepting it before it reaches properties. And then the land would be regraded to sort of promote flow back into the South Quake. Now, because we're retaining water in their land for a slightly longer period of time, that was where the excessive flood depths came from. They wouldn't necessarily be compensated for flooding of their land because obviously it is a registered floodplain. The compensation would revolve around how much land we would have to sort of accommodate in terms of the embankment that would be getting built there, and then obviously disturbance on that during the construction phase.
Okay, thank you very much. I have no further questions. Thank you very much for taking the time. Oh, sorry, hold on, just before you, Councillor Braun.
Sorry, Provost, it's a bit slow coming through. Going back to the compensation question again. I mean, assuming it gets organised, how quickly would they get the compensation? Because you often find when these things start, you talk about compensation, it drags on and on and on. So is it a quick process once, assuming you could get to some sort of negotiated level?
The compensation process basically happens at the point that they're impacted. So they wouldn't be due compensation until the scheme is essentially complete. There has been instances where we have accommodated a request to pay something early, but the Flood Act says that the compensation is only due once they've been impacted.
Okay, thank you very much. Thank you very much for speaking to the report. I'd now like to invite the Leader of the Council to move the report.
Thanks, Provost, and thanks, Rory, for that. The South Kinross Flood Protection Scheme is of critical importance to the Council's flood risk management plans, both in a national and local sense. The community in Kinross has been badly affected by previous flooding, particularly in February and August 2020. Council officers have worked closely with the community to develop the proposals for the flood scheme, and this has included a public exhibition in September-October 2023, face-to-face meetings and liaison with the community, and also the publication of a public consultation report on the proposed scheme. Only 2 objections to the proposed scheme were received, which is a testament to the extensive public consultation carried out by this council and their officers. As those objections remain in place, I would therefore propose a motion to council to support the paper and recommend making a preliminary decision to confirm the proposed flood scheme without modification. This will allow the scheme to progress to the next stage of the statutory process. So I'm happy to move that paper.
Thank you, Deputy Leader, to second.
Thank you, Provost. We in Perth and Kinross are, for obvious reasons, acutely aware of the effects of climate change. We already see all around us, most especially the current and likely increasing level of flood risk from our rivers and streams. Enhancing flood protection in areas of greater risk is therefore obviously of paramount importance to this Council. And we have already heard this morning from our young people how important it is that we do address the challenges presented by climate change. Accordingly, I have no hesitation in seconding the report's recommendations to progress towards this scheme to protect South Kinross. Thank you.
Thank you very much. First comment, Councillor Roberts.
Thank you, Provost. As you can imagine, I totally support this paper. As a resident of Milnathort, I know that the flood prevention schemes that we've put in there have been a tremendous success and brought peace of mind to many local people who feared heavy rain events. I'm very disappointed there's been 2 objections to this application, the flood prevention scheme, and I hope they can be resolved quickly. It's not just the residents of South Kinross, and I feel really sorry for the ones that have been flooded in the past and continually face the fear of flooding, which is a dreadful thing. I've got a lot of experience of flooding, and but it's also the businesses as well who are badly impacted by it, which we've got to remember. The other thing about this flood prevention scheme for South Kinross is when that goes ahead, it's going to open up the land that was the former auction market site, a large site, which the leader of the council was down looking at just recently, with the other board members from Kinross, which is waiting for development. That can't be done until this flood prevention scheme is in. So it's holding up a lot of important work in Kinross, and I'd be delighted to see when it goes ahead and brings peace of mind to the many residents who have been affected by the flooding of the South Quay and its tributaries in the past. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Robertson. Councillor Waters next.
Thank you, Provost. I remember well, Councillor Lang mentioned the 2020 incidents, and I remember well in February 2020 where a number of people were flooded out of their houses. A lot of businesses had to close down for a considerable period, and then a number of the residents had just got back in their house in July and August, only to have another event get repeated. Not quite as bad, but it still affected a number of households. The impact of these flood events, as I'm sure many colleagues in this chamber will have found in their own ward due to flooding with the climate change, is increasing. But the impact on our residents and our businesses and local communities is quite severe, and it's important that we do all we can to try and adapt and mitigate these changes. A big thanks to officers for the consultation during this whole process, which was very well attended, and they put a huge amount of effort into doing some display boards and everything like that to help people understand what was trying to be achieved here and the process for doing it. It is disappointing we've got objections, but the right is there for people to object as part of the process, and there's nothing we can do to that. A huge thanks to all the constituents and businesses and other public bodies, Nature's Corp and various other bodies and factories for their who've come forward and actually proactively tried to help as part of delivering this scheme, and that's important to remember, that there are a lot of people in South Kinross and in Kinrossshire that understand the impact of these flood events and are assisting officers to find the solutions, or to give the land or various other things to help get these solutions in place so that we can try and protect our community from future events. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Smith.
Thank you very much, Provost. What I would like to say to the people of Kinross, because I have to admit I don't know the area very well, but after someone who has lived beside the Lochte Burn, the feeling of terror when it rained was just enormous. When the flood scheme came there, it was absolutely wonderful for the people, and it lifted up their mental health, etc., etc. So I just wish the people of Kinross all the best, and I hope this goes as soon as possible. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Smith. Mr. Leader, do you wish to sum up?
No, thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. Members, are we happy to agree the report? Thank you very much. Members, move on to item 8, the Chief Social Work Officer Annual Report 2023-24. I'd like to invite Aaron Singh, Chief Social Work Officer, to introduce the report. I think Claire Mailer's been sacked as stage director here. Mr. Singh, please.
Thank you, Provost. The Chief Social Work Officer report is an annual assurance report to support elected members and the Council determine if effective, professional and high quality children and family social work, adult social work and justice social work services are being provided through scrutiny of service delivery. The report before members today is the 2023-24 annual report, for which Jackie Pepper was the Council's Chief Social Work Officer. I'd like to take the opportunity to thank Jackie for her professional leadership to both the Council and workforce during that time, which included ensuring our most vulnerable citizens were in sight and cared for during the pandemic. The Chief Social Work Officer report is one of 3 reports that highlights the work that we are doing to safeguard children and young people and adults who need protection. To avoid duplication, I'll defer comment on that area of work to the following 2 agenda items from the Child Protection Committee and the Adult Protection Committee. The report provides extensive detail of activity undertaken across social work teams in the Council and in the Health and Social Care Partnership. The report shows that service redesign across children's and adult social work duty teams is leading to success in our ability to undertake timely screening of referrals and provide early support to mitigate the need for compulsory statutory intervention. Within our adult social work services, there is clear evidence of a reduction in initial screening of referrals and time taken between contact and assessment. As noted in the report, most children and family social work intervention is provided on a voluntary basis under Section 22 of the Children's Scotland Act. Our teams have worked hard to change the narrative of the need for compulsory measures of intervention to receive social work support. This has only been achieved due to our investment and service redesign into early intervention supports. Working with families under Section 22 does not diminish the presenting complexity of need that staff are dealing with, but offers a collaborative approach to achieve change. Our early intervention supports are leading to a reduction in our looked after children population, and many of the 2,440 children supported by Children and Family Social Work will also be part of the near 6,000 children living in poverty in Perth and Kinross. Our supports for children with additional support needs provides good evidence of how services are outward looking and providing individuals with community-based pursuits to support integration as part of our self-directed support offer. The report highlights the array of community sentences imposed by courts that are managed by our justice social work services and staff working with individuals to address the underlying causes of offending behaviour and the opportunity to make reparation through unpaid work in the community. As we aspire to deliver excellence, the report provides evidence of how different service areas are redesigning their teams by responding to continuous improvement activity and listening to the views of those in receipt of services. Notwithstanding the many successes, we've had to respond to changing needs, and these challenges have also been presented at a national level, are having an impact on how we deliver services locally. The report highlights the challenges around the recruitment of social workers and social care staff, and whilst our learning and development staff have made excellent inroads to attract and retain staff, this will undoubtedly remain a pressing concern for us in addressing unmet need. As noted in the cover report, we cannot escape the realities of the financial pressures on the future of social work budgets, not only due to increased inflationary increases, which means that our budgets no longer have the purchasing power that they once did, but also the increased complexity of care needs in adding costs, which was forecasted, didn't fully account for the demand. As recognised, increased life expectancy for individuals with profound and multiple learning disabilities and physical disabilities is requiring care and support of a nature that couldn't have been predicted across children's and adult social work. And whilst our older people are living longer, healthier lives, when they do need support, it's often due to complex, multiple health conditions, with the provision of that level of support being difficult to provide. The packages of support required to support these groups are very costly and placing significant pressures on our social work baseline budgets. I remain optimistic, however, not least because our corporate priority of protecting and caring for our most vulnerable people recognises the importance of ensuring dignity and respecting the rights for those who look to us to safeguard their interests. I am proud to stand before you today to showcase and represent the work that our social work and social care staff do day in and day out that often goes unnoticed. I have a number of colleagues here today with me that will endeavour to answer any questions, and Zoe Robertson is also available online in respect to any questions for adult social work services as well.
Thank you very much for that informative introduction. I've got first question from Councillor John Rebeck.
Thank you, Provost. Morning, Aaron. The report alludes to it, so I'm not going to pick out a particular page, but early intervention is really important, and I think we all understand that it's the right thing to do. But in addition to it being the right thing to do in terms of moral compass, does it save us money in the long term?
I think the report provides really good evidence in terms of that declining need for statutory measures of compulsory intervention, and it's ordinarily those statutory measures of compulsory intervention which actually end up costing us more in the longer term. So the more we can provide in terms of early intervention to prevent the escalation is going to be a cost avoidance for the council.
Thank you. Councillor Shires.
Thank you, Provost, and thank you, Aaron, for the report. It makes really good reading, and we know that I appreciated your comments about the unsung heroes that are a lot of our social workers, but the work that many of us don't ever see. My question's around the workforce planning. Are we confident that we've got people coming through this system now to, I don't know about the age profile of social workers, if we're expecting a number of retirements in the near future, and if we know that we've got people coming through the system, and I welcome the information about the placements for students that then encourages them to come here, and that will hopefully plug a gap, but it's just to get that picture about the forward planning for our workforce. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Shires. One of the kind of keen endeavours, I suppose, that we have as a service and as a council is about looking at workforce planning and about doing those projections, just as you've described. We have undertaken quite a number of detailed work to look at the ageing profile within our workforce and about what that's going to mean. Interestingly, what we're seeing in terms of the new recruits around social work is is a very young profile of newly qualified social workers who are coming in. They are requiring quite extensive support in terms of supervision, but also kind of mentoring support as well. And whilst there's been national recognition around that, around the supported year for newly qualified social workers from the Scottish Social Services Council, that does take away capacity within the service to respond to need. Whilst it might just be for a year, the demand continues. So we are working collaboratively across all our teams just to look at what the impact's going to be. But I am acutely aware, potentially over the next 5 years, we are going to have a significant turnover of our most experienced staff.
Thank you. Councillor Peter Barrett.
Thanks. I wanted to continue on the workforce development theme and ask the Chief Social Work Officer, because you touched on that in your introduction. Page 182 of the report talks about the 100 whole-time equivalent social carer posts required to meet current levels of unmet need, and it goes on to talk about 25 additional social carers being recruited in the course of the year. So, you know, the easy arithmetic there is it's going to take 4 years to fill those posts if we don't do something markedly different from what we're doing at the moment. So I wanted to ask, you know, are we scaling up the recruitment activities and initiatives that are mentioned in the report to replicate things like the work that we did in Highland, Perthshire, across all of the social care administrative areas? And if we're not, have we come forward with that as a budget pressure in order to do that over the next year and coming years?
I suppose what I would say, Councillor Barrett, is that any initiative takes time in order to come to fruition. And I suppose what we can see within the report is some of the initiatives that have been implemented by our learning and development team are beginning to bear fruit. I do think it's probably going to be another couple of years before we begin to see the real value of that. As you can see within the report, I've highlighted a number of areas, whether it's engaging directly with schools around social care being a viable career opportunity, because a lot of the times individuals don't see that, and actually making those opportunities much more attractive. We're also looking at providing more opportunities for our staff, our senior social care staff and our paraprofessional staff, social work assistants, to actually undertake the fast track in terms of social work qualifications as well. So there are a number of initiatives, I guess, from a workforce development team that have commenced. But as I said, I think it's going to take some time for that to come to fruition. We will continually review that, monitor that, and if we need to tweak that, and as you've described, if we need to put a wee bit more emphasis or traction in and around it, then we will be escalating that further.
Thank you. Councillor Braun.
Thanks, Provost, and thank you for the report. Obviously, it's a good one, and obviously the appendices at the back reflect that. My question's on page 172. We're looking at child concern reports, and there's a steep climb in the 11 to 15-year-old age range. I just wonder why that specifically has seen such a change.
I thank you for the question. I mean, I suppose the reality is teenage years are sometimes the most difficult to manage for parents. Clearly, puberty hits in, and young people are kind of testing the boundaries, and that becomes quite a tense time for families. You know, peer influences can sometimes take precedence over what parents want. So that normally is a bit of an expected increase in referrals that we would expect to see. So it's not unusual, is what I would say to you. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Massey.
Thank you, Provost, and thank you, Mr. Singh, for the report. My question is on page 178, and it's chart 17, adult protection concerns. I noticed that police vulnerable persons reports they've doubled since 2018. Can you give an explanation or explain why this increase has happened?
Thank you. I'm going to hand over to Ian, who's our lead adult protection coordinator.
Yeah, thanks very much. Yeah, we were a wee bit surprised when we saw that data come through. So colleagues in the police and I have spent quite a bit of time trying to unpick why and whether we're leaving any adults at risk of harm as a consequence of that. And the answer is no to all of these questions. What we're seeing is really difficult to know what you don't know. We can't then reach out to those who might have reached out to the police in the past. But certainly there's a number of hypotheses that we're coming up with. One is we're getting that early intervention right, where people are getting the right support, where they don't need that crisis intervention from the police to then get that support. So we're kind of reaching out to them earlier. The second part is we looked at kind of what we've all gone through in the last maybe 2, 3, 4 years, where the prevalence of COVID and isolation still has relevance, but perhaps less so, and we're starting to kind of see ourselves come out of some of that. And the third thing is police are now being able to connect with these frontline services without the need to refer in. So whilst it did come as a surprise to us, we have kind of set up a wee short life working group between police and ourselves to make sure that actually we're not missing anyone who previously might be considered an adult at risk of harm.
Thank you. Councillor Mayor. Sorry, yes.
Apologise, I didn't hear what you said, Provost. My question was to do with the point 4.14 on page 150 regarding the REACH team. And I just wondered if you could actually tell us what is the REACH team made up? What professionals are actually involved in the care of those children? I know SLT, speech and language therapy, is involved, but I'm not sure of what other professionals you have working for you in that team. Thank you.
So we've also got a psychologist who's part of that team, and we also have a teacher as well, and we will also bring in additional kind of counselling support as and when required. So it truly is kind of multidisciplinary when it needs to be. It will respond to the individual needs of a child. I mean, the caseloads for that team are extremely small because of the intensity of work and that wraparound support that we provide. So that multidisciplinary team or that network of support that we will provide will very much depend on the needs of that individual child.
Thank you.
Councillor Braun.
Thanks, Provost. Just a second question on page 180. Vulnerable adult reports, although it's not the highest, the biggest jump seems to be in suicide attempts, and I just wonder, is that something to be concerned about? And what would we think the concern is? What the reason is, sorry.
Thank you. So in terms of the chart 22 is, I think you're referring to, which is the types of concerns that are coming through, and as we can see there's an increase around suicidal ideation in particular. We are really concerned of that, and as Ian has just alluded to, we recognise it's been a really difficult number of years for individuals in terms of coping and kind of dealing with the aftermath, I suppose, of the pandemic. So remember, this report is in relation to 23-24. The report does highlight we've undertaken mental health triaging to make sure that we're providing the right signposting and the right supports as determined by what the presenting issues are.
Thank you. I'd like to invite the Leader of the Council to move the report. Thank you very much, Mr. Singh, for answering all those questions.
Thanks, Provost, and thanks, Anne, for introducing the report. This Chief Social Work Officer annual report covers the final reporting period for which Jackie Pepper, who's well known to you all, was the Chief Social Work Officer for the Council, a role that she held and fulfilled marvellously, I'd like to say, and I'd like for the last 7 years. So I'd like to take the opportunity to thank Jackie for the professional advice she offered during this time to elected members and leadership to the social work and social care workforce. The Chief Social Work Officer annual report provides an opportunity for elected members and the Council more broadly to understand the key roles statutory social work and social care services play in safeguarding those most in need in our communities. The report provides a detailed and comprehensive account using data to illustrate performance and case studies to evidence impact. is the Chief Social Work Officer's assessment that despite the challenges faced during the reporting period, social work services in Perth and Kinross have demonstrated resilience, adaptability, and a commitment to continuous improvement. The collaborative efforts of various teams, services, and partnership working have ensured that statutory social work duties are delivered effectively, providing assurance on key areas of public protection and frontline service delivery. The report evidences how children and family social work and adult social work have redesigned their front door services to ensure timely triaging of referrals. The focus on early intervention is key to ensure that early advice, guidance, and support is there to prevent escalation into formal intervention. The report notes the fiscal challenges, notably inflationary pressures that are impacting on the workforce, council, and service providers. The nature and type of support that social work is providing is becoming much more complex, from ASN provision for children, young people, and adults who have multiple disabilities, to older people and the provision of complex care packages in the community. Perth and Kinross's rural geography makes this particularly challenging. I would like to extend my gratitude to our workforce in social work and social care, who are determined and committed in their individual and collective contribution to support those most in need in our communities to improve their quality of life. And I want Jackie and Aaron to feed that back down on the behalf of all of us in the council about how we feel about the difficult jobs and the dedication they have, and want you to take that back to the teams. As we face the fiscal challenges in the years ahead due to the growing complex need in our communities, it will be important that we work with the Chief Social Work Officer and the Integration Joint Board to ensure as a council we are able to adequately fulfil our statutory responsibilities to our most vulnerable citizens. I move this report.
Thank you. Mr Deputy Leader to second, please.
Thank you, Provost, and can I just add my thanks to Jackie for her sterling service as Chief Social Work Officer. And can I also thank Aaron and colleagues for the comprehensive and confident way in which they have answered elected members' questions today, which I found particularly impressive. I wholeheartedly endorse and support the leader's sentiments and comments. Looking to the future, Aaron has set out the challenges we face as a local authority and as a health and social care partnership. Addressing workforce pressures, improving recruitment and retention of carers, and increasing focus on early intervention are all key. And I fervently hope that the Scottish Budget this afternoon, together with decisions we as elected members will hopefully take in this chamber later this afternoon and at the budget meeting on 26 February 2025, will enable us to make good progress in these key areas. Happy to second.
Thank you very much. First comment, Councillor McCall.
Thank you, Provost. I just want to add my agreement to everything that the Leader and the Deputy Leader of the Council has said. But on a more personal basis, I would just like to commend the social work teams for the work that they do to not just to members of my family, but to the wider community. I think it's very often unseen because we don't have as many people that come forward in crisis. But the work is invaluable, and it not just affects the individuals that are being supported by social work, but also their wider families and the communities that they live in. So I think that's hugely important. And I think we should, as well as recognising the excellent work that our social workers themselves do, I think we shouldn't forget also there's a huge back office team there that provides invaluable support. Particularly the finance team, who have to grapple with the continuing demands on their resources, but also the operations teams and everybody else that supports the social workers to do their jobs. So that's a personal note from me of thanks to everybody who's involved in the social work team. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor McCall. Councillor Peter Barrett.
Thanks, Provost. I think the Chief Social Work Officer's report spells out clearly and I would say succinctly, but it's a long report, but it's comprehensive. But I think the scope and breadth of the contribution that social work makes to improving the lives of vulnerable people in Perth and Kinross is immense. And when you digest the contents of this report, I think it really brings home exactly how big that contribution is. So I want to commend everybody involved in that, particularly like to commend the work of the Children Alone Seeking Asylum team from an equalities point of view. I'm really grateful to the work that they do and in setting an exemplar or the exemplar of national best practice and providing advice to other local authorities so that they can emulate the quality of service that we provide. I think is excellent. There's really strong and recurring themes coming through from the case studies, particularly with regard to, as was mentioned, the complex packages of care that are required to be assembled to avoid people or to enable people to be discharged from hospital into care homes and care at home. And I think those case studies serve as a reminder that this is what care is all about. There's far too much focus nationally on finger pointing and blame laying and an obsession with delayed discharge numbers and postcode lotteries and too much focus on creating unworkable solutions like the National Care Service and not actually providing councils with the money to get to the guts of the problem and actually provide the care that's required. So I have my fingers crossed that Councillor Drysdale is right and that the Scottish Government in their budget this afternoon do provide the necessary resources to provide the necessary care services. I have to say, Hame Doots.
Thank you, Councillor Barrett. Councillor John Redbeck next, please.
Thanks again, Provost. Social work's really important, of course it is. I don't think it's always fashionable. I think societally we don't like to think about it too much. We're happy that the work's getting done. We don't want to think about it because frankly we're often uncomfortable with the work that's involved. So I think it's really important that we recognise the hard work of everybody today, particularly those that are at the coalface doing the most challenging of work. There's lots of people we have in Perth and Kinross that do fantastic work, trying to keep our young people resilient, engaged, achieving, confident and healthy, which I think is reach. Sorry, I couldn't resist trying to get that one in, but it is really important work that we do. And the reach team, which I frankly was dubious about back in 2017, as Jackie Pepper will know, and we did ask lots of questions on this side of the house. I'm delighted to say I was wrong. It is a fantastic service and full commendation to you. A couple of very brief personal thanks, not least to Councillor Frampton, who covers a lot of this stuff for me in terms of the young people and children and families' work. Ellie is informed and passionate about it and is a great credit to this council with the work that she does. Mr. Wilkie has been very helpful personally with a couple of cases that I've had, so thank you to him. And without being too personal about it, I think Aaron has been a fantastic strategic lead since he came to Perth and Kinross. I thoroughly enjoy working with you. So thanks to everybody. Keep up the good work, as it were. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Councillor Caroline Shires.
Thank you, Provost. A festive outbreak of agreement, I think, around the Chamber this afternoon. I too would just like to thank Jackie. I learned so much working with Jackie, not least the very dark sense of humour that people who work in social work seem to have. And it's good to have Aaron on board now. I raised the question about workforce planning, and I think it is something that we do need to be conscious of and encouraging colleagues at the Scottish Parliament to do more to make social work a career that people seek to go into. And if you speak to some of the more battle-hardened social workers in Perth and Kinross, they'll all tell you why they went into it. And it's like they never lose that I suppose that's what helps them get up in the morning, go out and do the difficult jobs that they do. That they all went into it with a desire to make the world a better place and to help those that need it the most. And that's what comes through this report. So I would encourage any colleagues who haven't visited Reach or met with any of their local social work teams to do so, and to get an understanding for the breadth of the work that they do and the real difference they make. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Shires. And on that festive outbreak of agreement, I'm going to invite the Leader of the Council to sum up if he wishes.
I don't think I really have to sum up, just to say, as Councillor Shire said, I think all of us at Perth Kinross are extremely proud of the service that is provided, and the services that are provided, and we maybe take it for granted that you just continue to excel, but I think everybody, all the comments today, give you the feedback of our appreciation, so thank you.
Thank you very much. Members, can we agree the Chief Social Work Officer report? Thank you very much. Members, we're going to break for lunch now, and we're going to return at 1:45.